What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Splash Bros podcast, your number one podcast for anything, fitness, health related. We're doing more lifestyle stuff now. Excited to be back on the show. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to Splash Bros podcast. Today, we've got our guest, Ian Rowan Legg, former Acadia student, Acadia alum, master's in kinesiology from Saskatchewan, and current coach at Atlantic Sports Performance here in Nova Scotia. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks for having me, man. It's good to be on. I love what you guys are doing. Love that you're talking to people and trying to reach out to more professionals in the industry. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's been a really fun journey, and we're really excited to have you on. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about your journey through Acadia, your time at Acadia, any advice you have for two graduating students this year, and then to how you ended up in Saskatchewan, and then kind of talk a little bit about what you're doing there, and then we'll get to ASP after that.
Yeah, for sure. So like when I was finishing high school, even to back it up even more, I didn't even realize kinesiology was a thing. I had no idea what it was. I got into working out when I was in high school. I was sort of training for sport, more so just wanted to be strong, put on some muscle mass. And I was finishing my high school degree, and I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. And I found out I could go to school and learn more about anatomy and exercise and movement. I thought that was pretty cool. So I came to Acadia, still not really sure exactly what I wanted to do career-wise. I got involved with athletic therapy, with the training practicum as it was at the time, which has grown a lot since then. But that's how I kind of got into coaching. My time there also was kind of when I transitioned to playing team sports to competing in powerlifting. So I was doing a lot of intense training and kind of learning through my classes, but also through a lot of heavy lifting and training at the time. And once I finished, I kind of knew I wanted to stay in strength and conditioning, but I knew I also wanted to stay at a collegiate level or at a high level and potentially work with pro athletes. So I thought that kind of continuing my education was the best thing to do. So I went, it's funny because when I was finishing, again, it was kind of like my high school experience. I didn't know exactly if I wanted to dive right into the field or I wanted to kind of continue my education. And it was probably March or April when this offer got emailed to us by one of the profs at the University of Regina, saying how they had this position open, a graduate position open for someone to work with the sports teams there while doing a graduate degree. So I thought that'd be a great way to gain experience while completing another degree, which I think is really important for anyone in this field right away. Like, I think that's the huge benefit to having that training practicum at Acadia is you can get a lot of really in-depth experience, practical experience. And especially this year with what's going on, I know you guys are going to be having your hands full trying to train a lot of the teams. So I really wanted to gain that experience while continuing my degree. So I went out there, I trained the football team for a little over 2 years, which is really cool. It was the first time that I had more of a lead role in running a lot of the training. So it took me out of my comfort zone a lot, even being at Acadia when I was kind of put in front of this team and forced to lead a lot of it. I was still a little nervous, and it took a little while for me to fully gain a ton of confidence when it came to working with that team, because I think football players are a group that can be a little intimidating no matter who you are, just because they have a lot of experience, they take it really seriously. And so you have to be able to connect on that level and have them understand that what you're giving them is like you have their best interest in mind. So I gained a lot of that from that experience, but I didn't want to stay in Regina. It was not the place for me. So I came back here. I love the East Coast. This is where I'm from. So I looked a lot for work when I came back. It is a tough field to find exactly what you want to do. It takes a lot of kind of training and doing, maybe not being in the position that you wanted to see yourself in, but realize that every position offers its own experience and opportunities for growth. So Elliot offered me an opportunity to come work at Acadia with APT, which would have been around the time that I met you. I think the beginning of that year is when I came down in September.
Beginning of last year.
Yeah. And so I know Rochelle was leaving and I was going to take her spot. So I would have been continuing at Acadia, but then COVID hit and obviously the finances weren't there from the university. So Vince, who I believe you've also met, know decently well, he opened his business also at the beginning of COVID in Bridgewater, but he did surprisingly well. I think he opened in about January, and not even 2 or 3 months in, COVID hit. And that's a tough time to have like a brick and mortar location. You know, you're paying rent, you're not getting clients in, but he really thrived. He really created a great like community with the people he trained, a great online experience. And he actually did really well during that time. Which actually led him to find, you know, the second location where we are now in Dartmouth, ASP Dartmouth. Funny enough, was another gym that was planning to open in March. Again, not the best time to open a facility where you're paying like 10,000 plus in rent for a large space. So Vince came in and said that he would basically run all the strength conditioning there and give them, you know, a real performance directed training program, not just, you know, lifting to get strong, something that's really aimed at their performance and creating a really unique opportunity, implementing a lot of sports science, which I was really interested in. So after Acadia didn't have the money to hire me, Vince reached out and everything kind of aligned from there. And it's been really awesome.
Yeah, that's who we'll have to get on next, Britt. We'll have to
Yeah.
get on. Yeah. And then we'll get Elliot too. And
we'll have the full triad.
Yeah. And then we'll get Rochelle, and then talk to us a little bit. You're big on Instagram, or you're getting bigger on Instagram, at perform.irl for those that are looking to check it out. You've got some really cool content going. Do you want to just talk about how you go through creating that content and then kind of what your plans are for the future with that content?
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because I feel like Instagram and social media are one of those things that a few years ago people would look at it and say like, oh, it's that IG guy, like he just puts up these Instagram exercises. And I think it gets a bad rap, like fitness and social media. Yeah, there is a lot of garbage out there, but it's such a good marketing tool. And that was kind of my main reason for diving into it. I shouldn't say my main reason. It's also a big creative outlet for me. I do like creating stuff. It's funny. I was a really like artistic kid. I loved making stuff. I loved drawing and painting and making crafts when I was really young. And so I feel like this is just like me, but figuring out a way like 20 years later how to express this with technology. But yeah, like you graduate and having that experience at Acadia is huge, and that pushes you forward a lot versus just having your degree in that textbook knowledge. But unless people know who you are, you're gonna have a really hard time finding a job. You know, you go on LinkedIn and you see all these positions available, and it's like it seems so attractive and so easy to see all these like university strength coach positions up there. But you got to realize that when these schools post these positions, they probably already have 5 or 10 other people in mind of who they want to hire. It's just like a formality. They have to put that application up there. So it's really important to kind of grow your network, reach out to people. And if you're not doing that, just have something where people can actually find you. And so when I started making videos on Instagram, it's kind of similar to what I had been releasing lately, putting out more like music videos, that kind of thing, just like playing around with editing, having fun with it. I started putting that type of stuff out initially and didn't really get much of a reaction from it. So I started making my content more educational because I figured that's probably going to provide more value for people. And that's really how you grow in the end, is providing that value and having a reason for people to watch you. But I also didn't want to just be one other guy on Instagram saying, oh, here's some exercises to grow your chest. Like there's a million things out there for the same things. And so I wanted to try and find a different approach to finding out what people didn't know they needed to know. I think that's a big thing, is like when people end up on this like Mount Stupid where they think they know everything, and it's like, no, you've just looked at a lot of bodybuilding.com workouts. And then you realize how in depth, exercise science really is and all these different approaches. And there's so much out there. So I want to find those, those topics, those methodologies that are a little different and maybe not super mainstream, and find ways to help people understand them without kind of making it too over their head. Does that make sense? Simplifying things.
Do you have an upload schedule right now? Like, I'm going to do 3 times a week, 5 times a week.
I did. I think I want to say like in the winter when I was still at Acadia, I got on a pretty good track of uploading like 4 times a week. And I honestly, God, I haven't been super consistent with it. Right now I'm getting like maybe 2 uploads a week just because I've been really busy.
Yep.
I think that's definitely valuable to be consistent. But it takes time, man. I'm not the most efficient person when it comes to putting things together. I think I could be a lot more efficient with my time than I am. And yeah, what was I going to say? It's just, it gets to be a lot when you're trying to balance all that with work and whatnot, but I'm doing my best right now.
Yeah. Well, I've noticed, like, I scrolled down your page a little bit, and I don't know how Instagram works with like the display picture, but your thumbnails or like the display pictures have improved a lot over since over months. Do you find that helps when you make a clean picture or a clean background more engaging?
Yeah. I like to think that it does. I want to make something to draw people in. YouTube is very big for that. I know, like, having a good thumbnail can take you a long way when you're just kind of looking at like the what's up next tab and you see all these videos there, and your thumbnail could be the difference from someone actually watching your video or not.
Mm-hmm.
Like with Instagram and videos, they kind of just start playing on their own. So that's more for people to navigate through my feed if they actually look at my page. That's the only reason I tried to make it look clean. And then I think it looks a little more professional, and maybe people are going to be more likely to follow me if they see that I'm actually like putting a lot of work into, making those little things a little better. Like, it's not something that takes a lot of time to make a nice thumbnail. So I don't know. I think it can go a long way.
Well, you got another follow from me a couple days ago, so
thanks, man.
I'm on the right track. Yeah.
Do you have a favorite Instagram that you follow, or do you have anything that you kind of model yourself off of?
I'm just trying to think now. I wouldn't say modeled off of anything. I've seen some in terms of like the feed. I get that idea from, I don't know anyone specifically. I just kind of knew that at one point I wanted my feed to look nice. Like, there's a clear cutoff point if you scroll down a bit where things just look way more out of order. And I'm just like, let's make this consistent. But it's also kind of a pain in the ass. It's like a corner that I've trapped myself into where like I have to upload 2 things in a row, and the thumbnail has to look like this, which means it's going to be this type of video. And I can't upload this other thing that I want to upload unless anyway, that's just a whole other thing. Channels that I like.
To be that electric blue color.
Yeah, it's a real corner I've trapped myself into. It's like, do I stick to the branding so people know it's mine? That was the other thing. It's like, I want to make something that if people share it, they're going to know that like, this is my content, this is my material. It's easier for them to identify that, especially if I'm less known. But yeah, people that I follow, really big fan of Jordan Shallow, who's a doctor of chiro, but he's also a power lifter. And I think he's very, how do I say this? He's like he's a black sheep in the chiro world. Like, he'll question a lot of things, even about his own education. And it's just very practical. He has his own course called Prescript, I think it's called. And it's just very practical anatomical knowledge, biomechanics. And yeah, he's got some really cool people. He's got a podcast that's really good, actually, one of my favorites. But just like a real person. He's not trying to do someone else's thing or just reiterate someone else's knowledge that they put out there already. He has a very unique perspective. So that's probably a big one of mine.
Have you, last social media question, I don't want to dive too much into social media, but have you ever thought about trying posting your content on TikTok? I say that, like, TikTok gets a really bad rap, like whatever, the dances, the party moves, but it's a really, if you're efficient at it, it's a really easy way to grow,
Hmm.
grow and learn.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And I'm just as guilty for like talking shit about TikTok because of all that type of content on there, but I do think it's super valuable. Like I'll post like there was a time when I would get frustrated if I'd post like a 45-second video and like, you know, barely anyone's actually going to watch through that 45 seconds unless they're like they really care about what I'm posting. But that's just the reality because I'm the same way with content that I watch in my feed. Like if it's too long, I don't always want to watch it unless I'm really trying to learn from that person. And I have posted some stuff on TikTok, hasn't gone that well. And I'm not consistent with it either, so that's my own fault. But it's funny because the stuff that does somewhat well is always content that's like not related to anything else that I post. Like it's something funny. And again, like the audience on TikTok is different. So the value that you provide there may have to be different than or just the way that you express it, I guess, the way you put it out there may have to be different. Yeah, I like to try to get into it more just because it is such an easy way to reach people.
It's about staying on the schedule with what you can do, right? It's not enough hours in the day. That's what I've noticed recently.
For sure. Agreed very much with that.
Let's talk powerlifting. Tell us about your powerlifting days, how you got into powerlifting. Are you ever going to get back into powerlifting?
Yeah, for sure.
Functional life for you.
I know, man. It's so strange because like, oh, where do I start? Like I started lifting weights because I just wanted to be strong and get bigger. It had nothing to do with sport. And at a high school level, that was fine because, you know, the level of skill at a high school level is only so high. So I could kind of fill that, how do I say it? Like my actual game skill, the game skill that I didn't have, I could fill that gap by being strong and be like a decent athlete. But then when it comes to like high level university teams, strength only gets you so far. Power only gets you so far. And not to say that it's not useful because that's literally what I do is make people stronger and more powerful. But if you're just a great athlete and again, have like a PhD in the sport, that's going to take you a lot farther. But I realized that I loved lifting. No matter how I was doing in sports, I just love lifting weights and I wanted to lift heavier. And that's when I realized like, hey, I could just compete in this thing that I already really like. I thought that was really cool if I could just start competing in the same way I was training. So started training for powerlifting. When did I do my first meet? Probably my third or fourth year at Acadia. And it was a lot of fun. I wasn't like crazy strong. My best deadlift was like 565 maybe.
Still pretty nice. So
yeah, I'm just like good at deadlifting.
I wish.
All I'm good at. I'm just long legs, short torso. We got those mechanics, but I like the culture around it too. Like as hardcore as it seems, people are like very supportive of each other. And I never really saw myself as competing hard against other people. I was more so just like trying to hit personal bests and get stronger. It was more about just training for my own thing. And then when I was in Saskatchewan, I did one meet and didn't go super well. And after that, I wouldn't say it was my performance at that meet that kind of ended things, but I was just so busy at the time and injuries were a thing. That's the funny thing is I got hurt way more powerlifting than I ever did playing rugby or football. Just I was pretty resilient when it came to actually like tackling and getting tackled, but man, the overuse injuries of just lifting heavy and lifting so much volume day after day, it was just a lot. So that's what kind of brought a lot of my own training and the way I approach training athletes to a much more kind of functional realm, as much as I don't want to use that word.
No, nobody wants to use that word.
Exactly. But just, yeah, because like you can get people really strong, you know, squatting, benching, and deadlifting, but it doesn't mean it's going to translate perfectly to sport. You know, strength is a skill. And if you're going so far outside your performance that you're not getting that carryover, or that athlete isn't able to connect those dots, then you're not going to get as much out of it as you think, despite putting up crazy numbers. You know, I've had had a conversation with the athletic director at the U of R when I presented some issues that I thought were present with their program. And she said, you know, our guys are the strongest that they've ever been right now. They're lifting a ton of weight. And I said, yeah, but look at their season. Like, they had a terrible season. So like, a loss just doesn't justify a PB, right? So, and I know there's strength coaches out there that are very vocal with having people understand that, you know, we aren't winning championships as strength coaches. We're supporting the skills that they already have, again, but it only gets them so far. But yeah, so I went from, there's actually a guy I trained, a rugby player that's with Canada, Team Canada right now. I prepared him for a Team Canada camp training virtually like a power lifter. Like, this guy was doing like deficit deadlifts and like back squats and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, he got strong. He put like 50 pounds on the squat. So I've effectively prepared him for the combine that they were doing, which was my goal. He's like, yeah, I'm fast and skilled. I just need to get stronger. So I accomplished that goal. But in the context of actually training him for a sport, it definitely wasn't the most effective way of training. And so my whole approach has changed a lot over the last couple of years. And I think that's been for the best.
Are you doing Squattober?
Squattober. So I did it last year for the first time.
I knew you did it last year. Yeah.
And I hit my first squat PB in like, I don't know, well over a year. Like, I hit a 475 squat, and my quad, I've had a lot of issues with like my quad tendon. And I think when I actually tested my squat that day, I hit 475. I like pulled my quad again, and it's just been an ongoing issue for a while that I could maybe manage better, but I don't think it's going to be tough to get through this year. Like, I've been doing so many unilateral variations for so long, and started front squatting again the other week, and man, it's so tough. It's like the opposite of how I used to be. Like, I used to be so confident with like back squat, front squat, and you'd put me on one leg and I was absolutely useless. But then, you know, I got my RFE front rack split squat to like 300 pounds, and I'm out here like struggling to front squat like 275. It doesn't make any sense. So
I'm like that too.
Yeah,
it makes no sense.
But again, strength is a skill, right? It's
I gotta ask, what's Squattober? I have no idea.
It was an event started by a company called Sorinex, where they put out like 5 workouts a week, I believe, and it's like some of them are just lower body, some of them are full body, but you basically squat every day of the week for all of October, and it's awful.
Yeah, and they run like a big virtual like PB thing at the end, so everyone like posts on forums and stuff how they did at the end of the month.
Yeah, it's fun, but you got to take care of yourself. You got to make sure you're sleeping and recovering. It's kind of like, I don't want to talk shit about about a Squattober, but it's kind of like my feelings on CrossFit. Like, it's a good way to get everyone like active and, you know, cheering each other on, but it's probably doing a lot more harm than
it's good. Asking for an injury.
Yeah,
it's like the worst.
Yeah, not ideal.
Yeah,
their Netflix documentaries are so good though.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
They're freaks.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're at ASP now, and then how long are you going to be at ASP? What do you think your future looks like?
Honestly, I really like working there. I like the idea of having kind of my own thing that is my primary source of income. I think a lot of people would like that, but it is a lot of work. And I've learned, you know, a lot about business just from working with Vince the past few months, which is great. Like, I'm learning so much about this position just because I've never been in the private sector. And I think it's super, super valuable for me. That's why I wasn't too hurt. Like, it was tough to leave, again, that collegiate setting, because my thought was always like, if I get out, how tough is it going to be be for me to get back in if I ever wanted to. But again, having that experience, you know, trying to overlook most of what's not overlook, oversee most of what's going on at ASP Dartmouth. Vince is up like once a week, so I have to do pretty much all the coaching right now, which is what I want. I really like working there a lot. I like Vince's approach to training. We're using a lot of sports science and implementing it in ways that I don't think most private sector facilities are right now. And I think we have a ton of potential to grow. We're starting to see a real spike in sign up. So that's going really well. But I'm also kind of working towards this thing with a friend in California that's more targeted at working with gamers. Interestingly enough,
I wanted this to go.
I think,
Whoa.
I think this is like, and it's funny because even like here, rugby strength coach posted that on one of his Q&A things the other day. He's like, I think esports is the new Wild West of like strength and conditioning, because it's such a new area and it's so understudied that you know,
it's so big right now. It's gonna get bigger and bigger.
It's so big. It's growing so much, and it's like non-existent in Canada. Not non-existent, but there's, compared to the States, like you've got a lot of high school teams that are incorporating esports teams in the States.
Yeah.
And universities offering up to like $30,000 scholarships a year. But we don't see that at all here. But, you know, it's funny, going back to networking, like last September, the September that I came to Acadia, I went to Thousand Oaks, California for this conference at Mamba Sports Academy. Now gone back to a sports academy after Kobe's passing. But I met this guy there who worked there, and he was like their director of esports. They had a esport training facility there. We became really good friends, and I left after that weekend, but we stayed in touch. And eventually he told me about this thing he's trying to make where they would be working with gamers to some extent, either prescribing them training at home, trying to get in with actual esports teams. It was very broad. So one thing that we're trying to do is get into like high schools in the States. We know a guy that works with a few high schools that are considering getting teams in. So we're trying to, we're going to have one esport coach that actually leads the teams, and then through him get some sort of like exercise programming in to make those, get the kids some form of exercise to make them healthier, just because it is a very sedentary sport. And so we want to get kids more active. But the more interesting thing kind of on the esports performance side is there's so much research showing how like aerobic exercise can improve cognitive function. And that's, I think the physical aspect is why people discredit esports so much in terms of labeling it as a sport, because it's so non-physical. But, you know, talking to, I'm not sure if you saw those videos. I was talking to this physio who works with a couple big esports orgs, and it's like, well, define physically demanding. You know, it's like, you're not going to, what's the Einstein quote? You're not going to judge a fish on its ability to climb a tree, whatever. You know, even though it's not a highly like physical sport, we're still getting heavy physiological responses during competitive gaming, and it's a very heavy like cognitive mental toll. So knowing that we can use exercise to potentially enhance that cognitive function, improve decision-making speed as well as accuracy, there are definitely ways that we can incorporate that as a regular training tool on top of normal practice. So that's kind of the approach we're taking on the competitive side of things. But then for kids, it's more so just like get them active, make sure they understand like the importance of a healthy lifestyle and exercise, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's definitely a growing industry too, because I saw an Instagram earlier today where this year, obviously it's to a complete extreme, but Ninja made more money than Giannis this year.
Really?
That's insane.
Like, that's the biggest level, obviously, but it's a growing industry. So good luck with that. That's amazing. That's super cool.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting because like with COVID, it started to blow up even more. Like there was articles a couple of years ago saying how, you know, video gaming could be really unhealthy. It can be addicting and all this stuff. And then suddenly COVID happens and there's articles coming out saying how are video games like the new way to treat like social whatever. People are getting annoyed that they couldn't go out with their friends and that kind of thing. And so they were suggesting video games as like a solution to that. But it blew up so much, like live streaming blew up too, because people were inside all the time and you know, what else are you going to do? So yeah, I think it has so much potential to grow. And again, it's one of those sports, however you want to define it, where you don't have to be coming in close contact. So it's one of the safest things you could be doing right now in like the COVID time. And yeah, I think it's a super inclusive sport as well. Like if you have a physical disability, you know, there's so many barriers that get taken down through esports. And so I just think it really is like competition of the future. I think it's going to keep growing, and that's why I want to be involved in it.
Yeah, it's great. That's all good stuff. All good stuff. Last question I got. So if you could go back in time with everything you know now, you're going into last year university, what would you tell yourself right now?
Last year university?
Yeah. You're going into fourth year at Acadia. What's one thing that you would tell yourself being like, okay, with all the knowledge you have?
Just start reaching out to people, start meeting people. That was something that I should have started doing when I entered my master's degree, and I didn't start doing until I was leaving it, because I thought, oh, I got to get a job now. They're not just going to put me in here and I'll just work with these athletes. Yeah, just network more. I think that's so big. It's going to be about who you know. And that may be more specific to the level that you want to work at, especially if you want to work in pro sports. Like you need to know people in really high places, but it never hurts to know more people. You never know what opportunities are going to come from that. One guy that I reached out to when I was finishing my master's was Chris Robertson with Rugby Canada. And he said, you know, we have this like a volunteer position basically for you to do some programming for the U18 prospects for the summer program. And so I literally just made them like a bodyweight program. And I went all out on this thing. I made like some video tutorials for all the workouts, and it was decent for being like a free program, I felt. And it ended up, you know, I was able to meet some more people in that industry. Rugby was kind of a place I would have liked to have worked in or like to work in, but it just gave me more connections and show those connections that I was willing to put in the work despite not getting paid. And that's a tough thing in this industry, is a lot of people do free internships and they don't like not getting paid to do work. But if you don't have the experience, sometimes it's one of those things that you have to kind of bite the bullet on and take it, and then it becomes extremely valuable later on.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, it's really good advice.
Anything else you have to say, Josh?
No, I just thank you so much for coming on, Ian. It's really good to just chat with you again, because I haven't seen you in so long.
I know, man. I gotta get up to the valley again.
Yeah, you gotta come down.
Oh, I love Wolfville.
Yeah,
I'll get
catch up.
Yeah,
sure.
I popped it on my Instagram. Any questions? And we got one actually. And the question was obviously diet related. That's what they always are. I'm thinking of trying keto. What are your thoughts?
Keto.
I'm going to say no. But
generally, I would say no. Some people respond to it well. It's going to come down to energy balance at the end of the day. There's some really interesting stuff by Christian Thibodeau on neurotyping. I'm not sure if you looked into his neurotyping presentations, but basically the idea that different personalities are associated with different brain chemistries, which are associated with different kind of physiological breakdowns. And then, so he has a lot of implications for training methods that work well, but there's also some implications for what diets work well. I know he suggests that keto might work better for some, but I'm going to say more often than not, like not necessary at all, really.
Yeah, just follow Canada's food guide.
Yeah.
and you can't go wrong.
Awesome. Anything you want to plug? Your Instagram,
sure. Perform.irl on Instagram, and same with YouTube. I try to stay active on YouTube, but it's tough. Algorithm's difficult. I do what I do. Try.
Yeah, it is what it is. All right. Thanks for coming on. Nice to meet you.
For sure, man. You as well.
All right. Thanks, Ian. Wrapping up. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Peace.
Peace.